at the chat, I put a little how-to books and bars, but I'll explain it here briefly. You raise your virtual hand, if you can find that button, and it shows me in order who raised their hand. I call on you, ask you to unmute yourself, and then you make a comment, ask a question. If you would rather not speak on, the video in front of it, that's fine. You can put stuff in the chat. I try to check in with that also and maybe ask help from some other people, because usually I can't monitor that as well as the whole discussion, but I come back to that later and when I can. So I'll put some stuff in there as I go, including what I put in there is our first icebreaker question. So lots of times I'll ask something just to get us talking. And this book made me think, well, what's your game? I love games. And it doesn't have to be a video game. It can be any game. Bonus points if it is a video game. I don't care if it's old or new. Would love to hear what your game is. I could list many of them, but I'll start just by telling you that, right now I still love playing Mario Kart. I play it with friends online, and it's one of the ways that we get together and talk. We set up a video chat and set up our laptops. We're all in different places, but we will race each other for like a night of Mario Kart, like once every couple months. And it is an absolute blast. I love doing it. I also love playing that with my family of four. It's great for us to play, 4-player couch co-op, which is one of my favorite ways to play a game. So that's one of my games that I absolutely love. As we go on, I might mention others tonight, but that's how easy it is. If you're wondering, it's not hard to just break the ice and tell us a little something about yourself before we totally dive into the book. So I also open with usually a bit about our author, and I put that in the chat too. Gabrielle Zevin is a New York Times bestselling novelist whose books have been translated into 39 languages. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is her 10th novel. It was an instant New York Times bestseller, and it was a selection for Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show book club. It was Amazon's #1 book of the year, Time Magazine's #1 book of the year, a New York Times notable book, and the winner of the Goodreads Choice Award for Fiction. And it's funny, when I picked it, I knew about this author. I haven't actually read her before, but that The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry, something like this, was quite popular and was made into a film. And I kept thinking about reading that one. It got great reviews. But when I read about this one and selected it, I had so many people tell me, oh my gosh, this was my favorite book of last year. So hopefully those people are here tonight to talk about it. But if you don't agree with that assessment, that's totally fine too. All opinions are welcome. So anyway, Gabrielle Zevin went to Harvard. She's in her mid-40s. She lives in Los Angeles. She's working on some more screenplays, including the screenplay for this film, which had quite a bidding war. So also a fun idea, cast this for me. Who would you cast these characters as? So I thought I saw a hand, but the hand went away. Anyone want to kick it off tonight? Tell us what they thought of the book, or tell us what their game is. Anything. Who do we have here? I see Kara's hand up. Kara, talk to us.
I wasn't a huge gamer growing up. Like, we didn't own like game consoles or whatever. So like I have fond memories of like playing Mario in like hotel rooms. Like all hotel rooms used to have like a Nintendo. So like that was like the only gaming experience I have. But I have a Switch now, and the best game I've ever played on it is Disco Elysium. And so I don't know if anyone else has played it. I would really recommend it for like a book club, because it's like basically a game that you read, and it's just a story, but it's so good. I've played it through several times, and it's really cool and funny. So because I'm not a gamer, I did not gravitate towards this book. I saw it on all the lists, and I read the description, and it just never like interested me. Like, I heard it was really good, but I like, honestly, if a friend of mine hadn't like given me their copy, and if Jeff hadn't picked it, I don't know that I would have read it. And I'm really glad I did. I thought it was like a really excellent book. It was super, super well written and creative. I was definitely really compelled the whole time. That said, everyone who talked to me about this book was like, it's about friendship. It's about friendship. And I kind of like, I'm like, who are you friends with? Like, what? Like, their book takes place over so long. And they're friends for like a couple years of it, maybe, like in their whole, like, they spend most of the book not being friends and not liking each other. It kind of feels more like they're like family members, right? Where you just like feel compelled to like and care for this person, but like you don't like them all the time. Or I don't know. I just like, didn't really get their friendship. And I thought Mark's was kind of like the only friend in the book. And I got why they were friends with him. And I was a little bit disappointed that that there was a romance. I would say that I was like kind of hoping it would be a platonic friendship between the three of them, and having a romance happen. To me, I was like, oh, I thought this was supposed to be a book about platonic friendship. So that kind of, I don't know. Like I said, I still really loved the book. But I would not tell people like that I recommended it to, that this was like a book about friendship as like a selling point, or platonic friendship.
So that's interesting. Thank you. First of all, I thought, and I was actually surprised because I didn't know that much going into it, that it was like, oh, of course they're going to get together. This is a When Harry Met Sally, right? This is actually going to be a romance. And I'm interested to think, to hear what you guys think, if there is, it's still elements of that here. I do have friends that I was friends with and then I didn't see for a long time, and then we became close again later. But I will say that most of my friends that I'm friends with for a very long time, we were steadily in touch and friends, and they're like family too. But I think that's a nice assessment. I kind of like that idea, because there's certainly times where they do not like each other very much. Especially, I feel she maybe didn't like him a lot of the time, and maybe he was jealous. And once the Mark situation comes in there, then I feel like there's some true love there. I mean, I liked them as a couple, and I felt like they really did love each other. But then it was sad, maybe for what that did to their friendship. Or at least how it affected him.
Were they friends? Like, she fell in love with Marx while she was resenting him. That's my thing. You can like go years. I've had friends where like we didn't talk for several years, and then we started talking again, and it was just like we clicked. But I didn't spend those years like silently resenting them. And then I haven't been friends with someone like, for years, where I was like, they've manipulated me this whole time. They're a two-faced person. Like, she spent a long time thinking that he like manipulated her into like an abusive relationship for his own benefit, like years, where like she didn't really like him. And I'm like, oh, that's like really rough. Like I don't know. And I don't know that it ever fully got resolved.
So it's interesting, because it definitely wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I did like what it was. And I actually give credit to the author for not having them somehow fall in love, because I was like, oh, well, now that Marx is dead, are they gonna, he's gonna take care of the kid? Is it gonna be? I still thought they were gonna find a way to, actually get together. But I thought what they had instead was more interesting to read, and maybe more realistic at a certain point. I really liked it, sort of the harsh, honest conversation that they had about it. But like, I never felt that way about you. I never thought about that, when she says those things to him. It's, I don't know. Well, I'm glad you read it. I like your thoughts on it. Stephanie Hansen, I see your hand. I'm glad you're here. I know you were one of the ones that couldn't make one of them. So, but you're here now. Thanks for being here. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I didn't see you.
So I'd like to respond a little bit to what Kara said about like a friendship that has a lot of like an on and off friendship that has a lot of off parts. And I also felt I got that like almost like they were more like brother and sister for a lot of it. But reading this, it reminded me a lot of Normal People. Was that a Books and Bars book?
Yeah, well, did we do that one? Or no, we didn't actually do Normal People. We did Conversations with Friends. Is that the name of the one? Same author, Sally Rooney. But it was right around the time of Normal People being on Hulu, and kind of, really a lot of excitement around that. And it made me read Normal People. But so we didn't actually talk about that one for Books and Bars. We talked about Conversations with Friends, I believe is the title of that one. The Sally Rooney that we talked about. Yep.
I read Normal People, which is about this couple, like a romantic couple that's on again, off again. But the reason this book made me think of that is I feel like the outsider can see how much the two characters care for each other, and that there is a lot of love there, but we can kind of, from a bigger, broader perspective, we can see this series of misunderstandings or insecurities that get the best of them, and they're not talking about it clearly, or miscommunications. And so these, grudges or misunderstandings will drag out for a few years. But I think we as the reader who gets a little bit more perspective, we can see, oh, they care about each other so much and they love each other so much. And there are parts throughout the book where they talk about love isn't even the right word, because it's they have this intimacy that they don't even know how to define. So I maybe friendship isn't strong enough to describe what their relationship was. So I feel it is a book about a very close, some kind of relationship that has a lot of insecurity. When she starts questioning, oh, he knew that Dove, or yeah, Sam knew that Dove was my boyfriend, and he made me go get that engine from him. And she just let that little idea get the best of her, even though ultimately Marks was like, no, I think I'm the one that grabbed that game, and he maybe never even saw the inscription on it. So just all these little instances where they're not communicating well enough to overcome some of those misunderstandings. But I felt like there's just so much love between the two of them.
Thanks, Stephanie. Pete, good to see you, Pete.
Oh, hey, everybody. Good to
Pete?
see all my friends here. I really liked the book, but because I play games, or I played these games that they talked about, and I was gonna maybe bring this up in the chat, but here is just as good as Ichigo. I was wondering if that sounded like Myst to me, but I don't know if there's any notes you might have, Jeff, on what games they were sort of playing with there. But then that aside, yeah, it seems like I think they did a great job. Well, she's a brilliant author. I love the character she built and the world she did, and it's so funny too, because these the threesome of the main characters remind me of every Harvard, MIT person I've ever met and known. They're all like that. They're half broken, because I guess you have to give up some of your humanity to make it in those places. But the game design stuff was a little interesting, but it was another one of these ones where I'm okay with this perspective of people who become rich and successful, yet they still have to go through life like the rest of us. Humanity exempts no one, and I'm sorry, Elon Musk and Bezos, but you can't buy immortality by some research startup. You're better off trying to work on a good legacy or something. But what I loved about the Sadie Sam relationship, though, is I took it was part of the plot. Right, all right, so they have this misunderstanding. It almost reminded me of romance, now she's my rival, or he's my rival, or something. And then if they did have a romantic connection, she would have had to give him a piggyback ride or something to round out that part of the story. Because to me, it's but they dealt with she focused on the nitty gritty, that stuff of things that were raw between all of them, and that I think the arc of the connection was really believable to me, that they bonded on this game creation thing, this process, this hard process they go through together and make something. But what I have a question for, and I'd love to hear the group thing, is the title Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And I have read Macbeth, and I am familiar with it, but I would love, especially we got a lot of deep literature people here. I'd like to hear how that connects to this story, because part of it is like Macbeth was sort of fated versus Hamlet was sort of character flaw driven. But I'd like to hear what people who have a more current memory than my high school memories of Macbeth are.
All right, English majors, you've been called out. Let's see those hands. Who can help answer the title and its significance? But before that, we have Mark with his hand up for a while. Mark, talk to us.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the book. I thought these characters were really three-dimensional. They're going to stay with me for a long time. I think a lot of the other books that I've read lately kind of set the heroes and villains on particular sides of plots, and there's not a lot of flexibility there in terms of how those things play out. So maybe my reading has been more limited lately in terms of how that has been. But all the way through, I felt like the author was doing a really good job with kind of playing into the idea of unreliable narrators in terms of taking on their own interpretations of what's going on for characters. I actually felt a little less enthusiastic when she gave away the fact that somebody's instincts might have been right about something. I seemed to be breaking her own kind of rule that she was setting up for herself in terms of letting those characters remain unreliable and let the people reading the book kind of figure out what their motivations may have been throughout. I can think of a couple of examples, like when she was kind of given confidence that some of what Sam's motivations were actually what was happening. I preferred when she stayed out of it and let us decide. I thought Dove was really the villain that kind of stayed a villain the whole time, but in the context of his time when cancel culture wasn't so much a thing, and maybe back when he was developing games in the classroom, his more villainous kind of actions and boundary issues may have been more accepted. So things like that were really fun for me to try to see through this light. You know, I read the Lolita reboot, the My Dark Vanessa book that I thought played in some of the same space with regard to relationships between mentors and students. So that's my initial comment here. As far as games, I like the cooperative games more than the competitive ones these days. So trying to leave behind some of the competitive ones. So games like the unfortunately themed Pandemic, which allows a group of people to try to solve a pandemic. That's been a fun one. And then there's Finders Seekers, which is kind of a mystery that you get every month. It's kind of pricey, but you try to solve a mystery together instead of compete for it. We like code names as far as a board game's concerned.
Oh, love it.
And then with
Love it.
regard to video games, Katamari Damacy is the game that I kind of leaned into, which was rolling a ball around and picking up objects and becoming larger and larger. It was a Japanese game. That was fun on one of the game systems that I was playing, but I left behind Grand Theft Auto to start playing Katamari Damacy. I love the world of Grand Theft Auto and everything you could do in it in terms of it being a sandbox, but the violence was weighing on me more, and I just bent away from it because of the violence aspect. So
Makes sense. I like co-op games too. In fact, I thought a lot about this book when I was playing this. There's actually a board/card game version of the old Oregon Trail where you play with cards, and it's a cooperative game where you're all basically trying to make it and not die of dysentery. And it is really hard. I've played it with some family members, and we just kept dying every time, and it just reminded me. It was classic because it was like a card game version of the classic text game, but a group of people playing together trying to make it across. It's actually pretty fun. Check it out if you ever like the old one, and it's mentioned a lot in this book. So
yeah, before we left Minnesota, the Fringe Festival had an Oregon Trail musical that was one of the more fun
nice.
Fringe Festival shows that was
Awesome.
out there.
Were you part
I
of that
did
one,
not
Mark?
care for the last game. No, I never got on stage for that. I
Okay.
always put my name in for the lottery, but I was always an audience member and not a cast member. So I did not care for the last game that the author put in there that kind of bonded Sam and Sadie again. I thought that was the most boring of the games that were introduced in the book itself. So I stayed with it, but that was my least favorite part of it. I do think Sam and Sadie were not destined to be, just because Sam had such an awkwardness with sexuality and Sadie didn't have that. It would have been a long process for Sam to get there with her. So that made that aspect more believable in terms of them just having the work friendship and not have it cross over. That's my piece.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Lots of topics brought up, a lot of ideas. I see we have some hands. Some other things I want to throw out there so we can think about. Sam, you mentioned him being awkward sexually. How much of that has to do with his, his disability, his physical, issues with his foot, and how that shaped him as a character, as a person. And that last game that you referenced, narratively, I want to really break that down because we're reading along, and then all of a sudden, now we are reading as though we are playing this game, like we're in the game, right? And it was very interesting, I thought, to see like all of the Easter eggs in there of basically like how, okay, this is that's that, you're putting it together of whose point of view is this coming from? Whose perspective is this? What is this that we're in? The way it was revealed to us, I thought was pretty cool as a narrative structure. But interested in your guys' thoughts on that. Donna's had her hand up for a while. Donna, let's see your notes.
Oh yeah.
Look at that.
First of all, hi everybody, and happy Mardi Gras Day. I thought there'd be more beads in the little boxes. I don't
Very
see
nice.
so many, but anyway, it is Mardi Gras. There is so many good comments already made. I'll just make a couple quick things. Pete mentioned the world building that he liked, and I recently read a quote from Nancy Pearl, who's kind of a famous librarian. There's even an action figure of her. She's from the Seattle area, and she talked about how looking for the next great book is really not always just a matter of character and settings and so on, but a great book is one that really draws you into a different world that you hadn't known very much about, or was fascinating and in kind of immersive, and created characters you learned from, and there were sentences that were put together in ways that made you see the world differently. And not being a gamer at all, I was just kind of thrilled to see how much I was engaged in this book. So I think the world building piece was on a variety of levels. Not only was it the world building they were doing in the games, but also the world building that the author did for all of us readers in the process. Another comment that was mentioned was something about the Tomorrow and Tomorrow. There's such a great piece. It's toward the end where it's talking about the game that those other gamers, the ones that left their notes and in that horrible shooting incident, and then came back, but like over a year later, to retrieve them and actually work on their game. But in the process of that game, there is a character who does the tomorrow. It's Mark's kind of in the game who does Tomorrow and Tomorrow, because it's kind of based on Macbeth. And then in there, Mark's in the game, it says, what is a game? It's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. It's the possibility of infinite rebirth, infinite redemption. The idea that if you keep playing, you could win. No loss is permanent because nothing is permanent ever. So I thought when I got to that part, I thought, I think it's a beautiful analogy for the whole world of these games, how you just there's always a tomorrow. You just start and start and start and live multiple lives and keep living. there was also, I thought the comment about the character revealing that Mark made was interesting. I agree that there were times when I thought, don't tell us so much about what they're thinking and processing. Let us kind of judge some of that ourselves as we're reading and kind of discover that as we go. But she really packed each character with so much of a backstory, so much of an insight into all the different issues they were dealing with, whether it was racial or sexual or all. I mean, it was just so many things, academic issues, whatever. I mean, there's so many things. And so it annoyed me at first, but I just went with it after a while because I was really enjoying all those characters and the layers to them. And lastly, I'll mention, like Jeff, you just brought up the whole body image thing. And what I thought was really interesting was how, yes, it would have been really unrealistic for them to be in a relationship because of the issues that Sam had about him. And there were parts where he just said he felt better when he didn't even think about his body at all. But in terms of his connection with Sadie, when there was a part where she talked about or thought about or whatever, how she didn't whenever she had a good idea, she wasn't sure it was a good idea until she had processed it through Sam, and how she would talk with him about it, and then he would react and kind of synthesize and edit a bit and give her reactions. And that synergism of those two and their creative process and their mind melding almost was very powerful. I thought that was it's not your usual friendship. I thought it was on a whole other level that was pretty amazing. And I thought kind of inspiring to think that people could be that close and mutually respective, mutually admiring, get on each other's nerves, of course, but wow, they had something that was pretty special. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Donna. Great points. And I think that is a key to the relationship, and that ultimately the book leaves us with a glimmer of hope that they will work together again at some point. You know, they're never going to be lovers. They're never going to be best buddies in hanging out all the time, but that thought that together they make each other even better. They push each other. Like it's the yin and the yang, and what they create together is better than what either of them does on their own. And they inspire each other so much that's something that they're going to come back to at some point. That is the true, the crux of that relationship. And it makes you think about different than like when someone says like they have like their work wife or something like that. But it's almost like, are there people in your life that they just, you just want to do stuff with them. Like they inspire you. Like you were like, let's create, let's make something together. I mean, I can think of people like that just, they get you fired up, and you're like, wow, if I could, tap into that, or if I would love to add to that or be a part of that. And I think that's really cool that this book kind of captures that in this day and age. So Allie's had her hand up for a while. Allie, I'd love to hear from you.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to see you all my buddies here. I am not much of a gamer. My husband is. He's not a huge fiction reader, so I'm going to try to encourage him to read this because I would love his take. That said, I did get really into Animal Crossing during the pandemic, so cooled a little bit, but that's sort of like the only game I really have ever played. But I loved that I cared so much about the games. I loved how they described those those worlds, and like how they described the games as in that immersion was like how I felt kind of reading this book. Like I just loved getting lost in it, and I was like talking about it and thinking about it. I thought that last game, the Pioneer game, was really, really profound and beautiful. Like once you sort of caught on, and then I went back and reread it. And to me, like the ending after that left me a little like meh. It almost felt like this sort of story and their relationship and how they've just sort of been each other's muses needed to be a little more open-ended for me. I usually like a nice tidy ending, but I thought that the game was so such an interesting way, like you said, Jeff, narratively, that I was like, I almost wanted it to stop, and I didn't really necessarily need to hear about like her relationship all these years later, and necessarily like her take on motherhood. Like that just felt a little tacked on to me and not as like emotionally resonant. I also just could not stop picturing Dove when she described him. I just kept picturing Chris Angel, like the magician dude, and just like the leather pants. Like it was so, he really stuck with me as a character too. Just the way she brought him to life. I thought her word choice was just so evocative, and I looked up quite a few words, and I just mwah, chef's kiss to her word choice. So I'm excited to read more by her.
In defense of Dove, I mentioned this in the chat. Yes, he's not great. I mean, there's definitely shouldn't have been dating that student, and did a lot of things not great. But I feel like there's a little bit of redemption. Like he still is hanging around. He's still helpful. He's still kind of friendly, and they still kind of rely. Like there's a check-in with him. I was almost surprised that there's still a bit of a relationship there. There's still a little bit of, you know, there was still a little begrudging respect or something that she wanted to still be in touch with him a little bit. So and he wasn't completely horrible by the end. Like he maybe grew a little bit and was not quite as bad, which was kind of interesting that he was still in there, because it would have been easy to just write him off or make him, you know, someone that like, okay, this was the bad and we had to get rid of him. But he sticks around, and it's almost, I don't know, kind of interesting, I thought. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Feel free to chime in, or anyone else that has a hand. I see Maura's hand. Maura, talk to us.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this book. Oh, before I forget, it did make me want to replay my favorite game, which I started, was Red Dead Redemption 2,
Oh,
which is wonderful storytelling, and kind of alternative Western history. So yeah, but for board games, a great cooperative is Arkham Horror, which is HP Lovecraftian in nature, but they kind of remove the problematic pieces of him. And it's a lot of fun. But I really enjoyed this book. I've been a gamer like my entire life, so that like hit me on this visceral level and like really took me back. It was very nostalgic. But one thing I really enjoyed is that Sam, to me, and of course I'll take it here, is a very queer-coded character, in that he even talks about how like he doesn't fully understand like why sex is so great and like relationships, and so he strikes me as like a little bit of like on the aromantic asexual spectrum, and that partnership with Sadie, that kind of collaborative energy they have, is really how he gets off, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I think we see this really popping up when he becomes so nurturing and caring for her when she's in her darkest moments, like going to her apartment day after day and creating a game for her, and kind of doing that exact same thing of like going to her day after day to kind of recreate that dynamic that they have, because I think it brings him life and it sparks him, and he sees her down and wants to see her respond in the same way as him. But I think that's part of the reason why she never fully connects with him and why she can villainize him so easily, as opposed to Dove, is that she understands the way Dove navigates relationships and doesn't fully understand the way Sam navigates relationships. And that's why there's this tension between them, and also why I don't think he ever like really tried to pursue anything or really cared to. That's the impression I got, is like it didn't matter to him. It mattered that like the dynamic that they have might be impacted, because he saw the way that she would get so engrossed in the relationships, like with Dove, and how that impacted her. And then with Marks, it was more of a concern as to like, how will this impact this good thing that I have going on with her? Not to discredit any of kind of the trauma that he had with losing his mother, seeing someone commit suicide in front of him, being physically disabled, or being an amputee. But I really read him as a queer coded character, and it like that made my heart sing a little bit to see him like also thrive and be happy and have this like strong friendship. One thing we haven't talked about is the Mark's kind of death monologue, which I thought was like so beautiful, and I listened to it on audiobook, so it was a different narrator, so I immediately knew like, oh, this is like something's happening, and I just like was sitting in my room crying like after that. It really hit me, and I thought it was like such a poetic, beautiful way of describing kind of passing on.
Thanks, Maura. Yes, that was really powerful. I also did the audio of it, and yeah, it was another nice narrative flourish to get that perspective on it. I really like that, and thank you for your thoughts on the asexuality. I like that you said that it made your heart sing. So if that's the least that we can get out of this Zoom, is that Maura's heart sang for a little bit while reading this book, that's enough for me. Thank you. But I'm sure we're going to get a lot more from Rebecca Moss right now. Rebecca, talk to us.
Hello all. Stay safe in this snowy night. I also listened to the audiobook version, and it dragged on a little bit for me. I got to be honest. I think I would have preferred to have been reading it because I could have gone faster. It was a long audiobook. Donna, I really like your idea of about building the world of game creators. As in my mind, they made them kind of centered as celebrities, and that's not something we see a lot, at least in American culture. I think it's true in other cultures, Japanese creators, other creators, game creators do attain a status that we don't necessarily come with here. But I did love the world building and to understand the ins and outs, the process, etc. I was really I enjoyed that. I did find the characters, and I'm gonna be a little annoyingly self-absorbed. I guess I'm just gonna say that they had very little interest in others, and this triangle was so strong. I'm not saying that they didn't have genuine feelings and all that, but even when they introduced the other game creators or whatever, I felt like they were just accessories to it. But that's just a reaction that I had. I do think the relationship between Sam and Sadie was very romantic. It just wasn't sexual. And I think that we don't know how to deal with those kinds of relationships. We expect two people who are in love, and I would say they were in love, to follow a normal route. I think they were both in love with Marx, for that matter. And I think if there was a world where you could have a three-pair, successfully, I think that would have worked, because I think Marx loved them both equally in their own different ways. I was very glad to have read the book, and I did enjoy her other book, AJ, the something or other of AJ Fikri. So I really am excited to see more of what she has to say, because I think it is there's really some wonderful things that are going to come out of her, unusual and new things. And to go back all the way to the beginning, my game, I am an RPG player, mostly on consoles. So I've done almost all of the Final Fantasy series, done a few other games as well, but I tend to like to be an archer, and, not so I can shoot people necessarily, but so I can shoot the little thing that I need to hit so that I can make the thing open, and then anyway, that's one of the things. But I've been a gamer, not so much I never really did the console or the, what do you call it, the arcade kind of game with the flippers and I did way back when we first got our first, like Pong. Who can say they saw Pong for the first time? And but, of any of, I would say Frogger was my favorite way back when.
Awesome.
So anyway, yeah, Atari.
Awesome.
So I did enjoy this book, and I do think I will probably reread it in print, because for me the audiobook even with the exception, I would say, of that part when Marx is dying and that other narrator, even though his voice was a little snarky at first, I grew to really enjoy having an insight into what it might have been like for someone to be dying and in this position with these people. But I think a reread in print would help me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I am so amazed to hear, like, we have never really talked about games, I feel like, at Books and Bars. And it seems like a lot of you, whether it's video or not, at least are gamers of a sort. And it's interesting. I was going to bring, if we were meeting in person, I have books of those magic art, those 3D pictures where you stare at them, and then you have to kind of pull back to see the 3D-ness of it. And so I have books of those things like this. I had them out like for the kids and everything growing up. We love those. And I pulled them out from our box of kids books and was ready to bring them and kind of pass them around. And I was also going to bring the Oregon Trail game and a couple other things. So if we had in-person Books and Bars and not Snowmageddon, there would have been game playing, a surprise game playing, and looking at 3D pictures. And I probably should have told you to bring gummies and just get ready to go off and get all high with us. But here we are. We're Zooming instead, and we're going to Zoom again tomorrow. Now, I am looking at what looks to me like modern American Gothic. Alyssa and Marlon. Look at these two in the frame. I'm calling on these two right now. Let's see them big and proud. Long time no see. Talk to us, Melissa. Talk to us, Alyssa and Marlon. Where's my American Gothic couple? Where'd they go? I scared them off.
No, we're here.
Here they are.
I think we both really, really enjoyed this book. I know personally for me, I would never like describe myself much as a gamer per se, but I do enjoy video games and get into them and everything else. And especially over the pandemic, but I kind of came to gaming, I guess, later in life, until I had a PS4 and I would play it occasionally, but when we moved to Philly, that was like my big, like, when I really got into gaming and wanted to like play a lot. And it was more for a social aspect of anything, because it was a good way for me to see people or hear people from home and catch up with them as we were like killing aliens or something like that, playing Destiny or something along those lines. So, and then I've always been a huge Zelda fan. And have recently worked my way through Breath of the Wild on the Switch for the first time, and that was
nice.
That was really great because I love the storytelling, I love the puzzling, and the kind of like, okay, figure this out, use this weapon to, make something happen in a temple, and I really like that aspect of it. And that's something that I think I saw a lot of in the book when Zevin is kind of talking through the creation of each game. I've never been hugely interested in the tech side of things, but hearing that aspect of everything was really cool. And then I really liked how kind of each game and the creation of it kind of becomes its own character or its own time era, basically, for the characters in throughout the story. And I think that was a cool way of kind of showing the passage of time and showing how each of these characters kind of grows like within their little increments, whether that's growing together, growing apart, not growing, or like growing entirely in their own terms, while somebody else is kind of staying a little more stagnant. I thought that was a really kind of a cool approach that I thought the author took. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was really enjoyed all of the relationships within everything, because they're so multifaceted, and it's really true of how I think relationships, at least in my life, have been. And it's like, well, you can be friends with somebody, but that friendship can be totally different, and you connect with different people on different levels, and even like, oh, certain friends I play games with, and like we really love playing like a certain game with, and we'll get super into it, and like that's all we want to do for a while. And then there's other friends where it's just like gaming is the background thing that we do while we're chatting with one another, and just kind of catching up on real life because that's what we have instead of proximity to one another. And then I really enjoyed the Sam and Sadie relationship as a creative partnership, because I've had a very close creative partner in my life, and she and I did not, like, we have not always been friends, and there have been those off and on aspects of our friendship. But the one thing that we really cared about and kind of come back to a lot is we started working together in college on creative things, and then she and I like basically came up with this little like fake company for ourselves to, I mean, I guess it was kind of a real company to try and do work together. And it was really just, hey, we like working with one another and creating this stuff together, and it was all graphic design based. And it was just great to have that other person that you truly connected with to bounce other ideas off of, or say, hey, this is a shitty idea right now, but let me throw it out there and see what you like about it. And we can just play the what if game for a while, and just sitting down with sketchbooks and going, ooh, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And building on those first ideas. And that, seeing that in writing and in literature was something new for me. I don't know that I can think of another story where I really like felt that relationship come through, where it's like, oh yeah, like I totally get where this is coming from, where you can be friends, but you have something that really, really connects you, and that is like the basis of most of your friendship. And then sometimes if that basis of your friendship kind of fades to the background or goes away or changes in some aspect, then you kind of can see or notice the friendship pulling away or fading back. And I really liked kind of seeing that and seeing how it plays out throughout the book in their lives.
Excellent point, Marlon. I was thinking about that too. It's really it's tough when the friendship is based on like a shared passion, and then something changes. Maybe if you just, I can just think of an example of like friends that you go see live concerts with, and when you maybe don't go to as many live concerts anymore, and it was like that was my concert friend, and it's like you kind of, I don't know. Do you come up with something new, or do you just whatever the next passion is, like you find the people that you have other stuff in common with? I'm still adjusting to the fact that friends that aren't going to be friends for my whole life, like that I have to accept that it's okay to just have friends for like a time, and then you both can move on, and that's okay, and there's nothing necessarily wrong, and maybe you'll come back into each other's circles. But I think I like this idea of I'm going to be friends with everybody forever. And, at any point we could reignite it, even though we haven't seen each other in 20 years. I don't know, maybe. It kind of depends. I mean, I think that's a weird thing, is that growing up without social media and without the ability to just, have to know what anyone in any place is doing is now a bit weird. It's like, I call people friends that I haven't seen in person or have a conversation with except online in like 20 years. Hopefully when I will see each other in person at some point before it's too late. But I don't know. There's some people that you have maybe accept that you're only ever going to be looking at pictures and text on a screen anymore. And is that a new, in this world, is that just a friend of enough of a friend moving forward? This is a whole other thing. I don't know. And Marlon, you don't have to come up with the answer, but Alyssa, you do, because you didn't say anything. So what do you think?
I don't have an answer to that, but although it does make me think of at my work, we rotate roles every couple of years. And it is one of those things where when you get like a good work partner, collaborator, and you're working with them like 5 days a week, right? In my case, and then you switch jobs, and you maybe bump them into them in the hall every couple of years. So it is funny how those things can come and go. More broadly on the book, yes, like loved the book, would echo a lot of the comments already made about the really rich, nuanced characters. I love that you could adore them one page and then be annoyed the hell like with them the next, and like across the board. The one moment that had me kind of nervous as a reader was when Marks came into the picture romantically. I was like, I don't know if this feels too easy of a too obvious of a love triangle, but it actually pleasantly surprised me, and I thought his arc kind of snuck up on me. Like honestly, he ended up being a highlight of the book for me by the end.
Yeah, Marks was great. Yeah, I too was like, oh boy, they're just setting up the typical love triangle. But I think that was one of the well-written aspects of it, that it was more than that, and then we ended up, maybe feeling for Marks when he was gone. I see Andrew has a hand up. Haven't heard from Andrew yet today. Welcome, Andrew. Talk to us.
Hello, everyone. I love the book. I was one of those that said this was my favorite book of last year. One of the reasons that I love the book was I felt like the book was done well enough that people were going to really like this book or hate this book for a lot of different reasons. And that's exactly what I've experienced tonight. I mean, the reasons I like this book haven't really been discussed all that much in the current context, but I agree with a lot of what was brought up. I felt like the book, I felt like the relationship between Sam and Sadie was defined by trauma and betrayal and mistrust, both perceived from elsewhere and in their own area. So, we haven't talked about, Sadie as a young person being told by her grandmother, you got to tell this guy what's going on here, her not doing it, and then him finding out, and how devastating that would be for a teenage boy to encounter. Meanwhile, some people are like saying Dove has some redemptive qualities. This is a guy who, handcuffs his girlfriend to a bed and goes and plays Grand Theft Auto. This is a hardcore character. I love that aspect of the book, that you could have this kind of reasonable sentiment towards these not very, I didn't find them particularly likable characters. None of them except Marks. Marks was the clear differentiator. I think Rebecca hit it right on the head. These are very self-absorbed people, with the exception of Marks. And I think that's part of the book, is that Marks is clearly the one that's instructing these people on how to be better people towards one another. And Dove is instructing them how to be better business people, and to not sweat the details so much, and to not give a crap about what other people think about your art, or what, that sort of thing. These were some really, really heavy topics that these characters were sending out there. I thought it was marvelously done. Really, it was so subtle, the way that the author put this stuff in here. I think people missed it. It's easy to miss in some cases, but the other thing is the Easter egg thing followed perfectly with the video game piece. By the way, I missed a college class due to my best game of Galaga ever, and my daughter and I played. The one game I'd play again from beginning to end that I've ever played was SpongeBob SquarePants: The Battle for Bikini Bottom. Absolutely recommend to everybody. It's fabulous game. Anyway, the Easter egg thing, I thought there was actually a lot, since we've read some Homer related things in here. I thought there was a lot of overplay by the Iliad and the Odyssey in this. First of all, the Master of Horses is just really out there in terms of him being Hector. The Sam character saying that, look, Marks, you're just like Hector. He's my least favorite character in all of the Iliad, and that basically you're a non-player character. That's how he described his best friend, was as being so unimportant in the world that he could be replaced by just about anything. Pretty harsh, I mean, when it gets right down to it. But I thought that the Hector thing and Sam being similar to the main character in the Iliad, Achilles. I mean, right down to the Achilles heel, his disability, and these his one soft spot. I mean, I really thought that it was just layered and layered and layered through there. And the other thing that I want to mention just about Dove, because I'm actually shocked we made it through an hour of this without anyone just kind of going crazy on this Dove character. I loved it because it was so clearly like what the 90s and 2000s was, like pre Me Too and all that. But I immediately thought of Dove as the Ethan Hawke character from Reality Bites that we talked about in the 90s. He's this cool guy, you know, with the goatee and the thing and all that. And he's the jerk. And of course, Sadie in the 90s can't help but falling for the guy who will not sell out. And who is Sam? Sam is the guy that sells out. Why? Because he has medical concerns and he needs some money. I mean, I just thought I mean, I could go on and on, I won't, but there were class issues going on. There were race issues going on. There was gender issues going on. I just thought it was a nearly miraculous book to deal with a contemporary topic like video game as art. I thought it was, you know, it was a real triumph, I thought, for the author. Just I could think about it forever. It was great.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I mean, I know you're making me feel like, oh, I shouldn't have put that in text, that I felt Dove wasn't that bad, but I don't know, like he's still around at the end. And I was like, oh, you know what? They all seem to be like, yeah, it's Dove. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we did some stuff. And ultimately, I think it's partially because, you know, she doesn't seem like as bothered by, like, she understands it wasn't the best relationship by the end and needed out, but she was kind of like, whatever, like she put up with it. Anyway, I'm not going to excuse him anymore, but I do feel like it really did elevate the game, if you will. And I think, you know, a lot of times, especially as a parent, you might look down on like, oh, you know, kids just playing video games all the time or something. But I love hearing, you know, how, I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 as an example. I mean, there's just so many games where it's just like a world that you are, I mean, you're just creating it, and you know, you're going along, and there's so many, it's like a choose your own adventure. There's all these great storylines, and there's so much put into it, you know. And it was mentioned in the chat too, now we're seeing finally a good adaptation of a good game with this Last of Us series on HBO, which is really worth a watch if you haven't seen that. But it made me want to go back and play more games and delve into them more. But it's like, where do you find the time? Something's got to give. You can't read all the books, watch all the shows, play all the games. But I do think if you are playing games with other people, then it kind of is like, you don't feel as bad about the amount of time I'm wasting playing Marvel Snap until they added that you could play with your friends. I was just like, I don't even know if I'm playing real people, but I'm having a blast collecting these cards and playing. Anyone else playing Marvel Snap? Is it just me? I don't know. I can't stop. All right, Stephanie, before I call on you again, Ginger has not her hand up yet. So Ginger, I'm going to go to you first. Talk to us.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of things that other people have said. The thing that I wanted to mention was I really liked how the author handled race and culture of the different characters. So many books, as soon as they bring in, you know, something about the racial or cultural or ethnic background of a character, that's like the only thing that we know about the character, and they just dive so deep into that you don't really learn anything else about that person. And here we just saw a cross section of a lot of different elements of how each character's background and the the cultures within their family informed who they were. And we got like glimpses into those things in a way that I thought was very much more sort of true to life, and how each of us, you know, has those backgrounds and has that deep, rich history and brings that with us as a part of who we are and not everything. So I really appreciated that.
Thanks, Ginger. Let's see. Stephanie, now we can come back to you.
Thanks. The point that I wanted to make was, as I was reading the book, like maybe a third or halfway through, I realized that I just had this kind of ongoing sense of dread. And I think it's because there was so much foreshadowing, or like accidents or sickness or illness in the beginning, and you knew like an explanation was coming. So like, her sister's in the hospital. Is she going to die? This kid has some problem with his foot and is in the hospital and doesn't talk. Like, and then we eventually find out what happened to his foot, and why is he raised by his grandparents? What happened to his parents? So I think in the beginning, I was just kind of like kind of under a cloud reading it, because I kept expecting all this bad news and explanations of, you know, bad events in the past. But it also, during that time, it hooked me into the characters. So I got really into like caring about them and wanting to know more about what was developing for them. But then the thing that I found most touching is I never, like, Marx is just this, you know, people have said he was the best friend to people. he actually cared and, you know, was consistently kind and thoughtful and didn't hold grudges and stopped speaking to people and was well liked. And there's a part in the book where they talk about he's a fortunate person with a fortunate life. And, you know, does he have a generally positive outlook because he's been lucky, or is he lucky because he's had a generally positive outlook? But then where the biggest tragedy to me happens was his unexpected death. And I didn't, like, with all of the foreshadowing and you know, trauma and explanations I was expecting, like, I didn't see something bad happening to him. So that part was a surprise. And then I just wanted to echo what people have mentioned and put in the chat, is that that chapter where he's in the coma and dying, I thought that was just so well done and creatively done, where it's, you know, flitting between different, like, at first I thought, oh, is this a new game they're developing? Oh no, wait, this is Marx's point of view, I guess. And as it develops, it was just so beautifully and creatively written. I feel like it's probably one of the best, or maybe the best, death scenes that I've ever read.
Yeah, it was really strong. And it, like we mentioned, if you had a chance to listen to the audio, that was well done too, and also very touching. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad that hit you in that way. I see CB is back with a hand up. 10-4, good buddy. Breaker. What do you got, CB?
I'll just say again, I agree fully, Stephanie. I thought that was like the strongest section of the book. And it was definitely the part that like emotionally like moved me the most. I was waiting for something bad to happen to Marx, because I thought that's what would drive things forward with Sam and Sadie, because I didn't see anything else getting them to talk to each other, but I was dreading it the whole time. But then the way it happened, like, oh gosh, I don't know. It was really beautiful. I thought like it was so well done. I kind of wanted to go back to something Mara said, so like an hour ago.
Please do.
Because I had the same reading, queer reading of Sam, and it was something that I really thought was well handled. I really liked the representation of it. That said, I also was just like looking at it, you know, critically and thinking about it, because I'm definitely like often will enjoy like Arrow Ace characters in fiction, but like a lot of like Arrow Ace representation in fiction is disabled people and like robots or aliens. And so a part of me was looking at it, and I think, I thought she wrote his disability, like me, not as a person who's, had an amputation. I can't like speak to how well it's done, but it seemed very like well-rounded and complex and interesting the way she handled it. And I can see how having that complex relationship with your body could like lead to you also having, like maybe like a bit of an asexual identity there. That said, because of the stereotype of like disabled people being asexual, and especially also we haven't talked about like Asianness, but like a lot of like Asian men are really like, what's the word, emasculated in fiction and movies and representation. So I did think like she handled it so well. I'm not saying like, she, was being ableist or like aphobic or any of those things. It's just like the way all of those things came together. Like we had like an Asian man who is asexual, a disabled man who is asexual, and she wasn't stated to be asexual, but I also kind of read it that way. I just thought like it's one of those things that's would be very tricky to do, especially as a person who's like presumably not those identities. So I kind of had a little bit a mixed feeling about it, even though I really like identified and appreciated that aspect of Sam's character. And then my other question is, we talked about, they kind of have this like romantic friendship going on. We liked the complexity. Romance doesn't have to have sex, all of those things. That said, she's kind of like always described as a pretty like attractive woman, and Marx is a very attractive man. And of the two people, the only two people she has that are friends with, she ends up with the conventionally attractive one and not the like the shorter, disabled, like non-conventionally attracted one. So it's just a thing where I'm like, yeah, she had a beautiful friendship with Sam, but also like it's very convenient that she ended up with like the hot guy. I think like, there's maybe some internal bias there. That's like a normal thing that happens with lots of people. But, I was like side-eyeing it a bit, especially since they both had thoughts of like, why I didn't like, she had a thought for like, it would make sense for me to be with him romantically. But then she like came up with all these reasons not to. And he also had moments where he was like, why am I not like with her? Like I should be with her. So they had moments where they considered each other. It was never a thing where they never considered it, even though they had that conversation where they were like, it was never an option for us. They both thought about it. So I kind of thought that conversation at the end was a little bit like, you're rewriting history a bit. You both thought about it with each other and it just didn't happen. I don't think it should have happened. I think they were bad for each other. So it's for the best. But if Sam was like tall and conventionally hot and not disabled, would it have happened? I don't know. And that's one of those complex things where you can't know. But just, something to think about maybe.
Thanks, CB. Speaking of tall and conventionally hot, Pete O'Grady. Oh, he doesn't even know that I'm talking about him.
No, other than my wife, that's a first. But okay, I love these points too, and Kara and Mara. When I was on the plane to San Diego and they were going through Sam's sexual history part, I thought like, oh my God, I wish I was in a cafe with Kara and Mara that we talk about like, all right, at least there's a tiny bit of representation of other people in a great American novel. But I think the book was definitely to me highlighted at that the death of Marx and the two of them holding his hands and that whole story. I think the long drawn out thing with the game was kind of necessary. I think that was the love language between Sam and Sadie. It was making games, playing games, and it was literally well done at the beginning where they mentioned that interview where Sam said like, no, the most intimate thing you can do with someone else is play with them, and all the hoi polloi on online. Wow, that means you're not doing it right. Blah blah blah. It's like, no, there's real love that people can have, and they can be missing parts. There can be all kinds of things. It's not boys and girls. It's people in a intimate understanding that I think that was the beauty, and maybe even the best part of the book for me. It was just it was just transcendent, and that's when, and Carolyn, who's not here, she thought that the end was sort of rushed, but I kind of think that they got there in the game, that they who Sadie and Sam are together, and it was all played out. And I think that was a great part. The story was over at that. Yeah, Sam and Sadie might like more games. They might have some brilliant things after this, but that's not the story. This is the story of kids. They start out as kids, they come of age, they go through stuff, and they go through what is a better representation of modern of youth that's more inclusive of actual people's experience, and at least a start, let's call it. We'll get to the Mercedes lackey some other time, but how do you bring everyone in a coming of age beauty story? This is a great story for the 21st century, I think.
Thanks, Pete. That would be a great pull quote. I bet they wish they didn't go to publication already. So they could have got Pete O'Grady saying, "This is a great story for the 21st century." I like that. Well, this is one of my questions, though, that I had in chat. I mean, I do feel like this book has, in some ways, kind of touched on a little bit about it. At least it sparked some thoughts for me about like what modern relationships are like, and one of the ways that people do come together can be over video games, and maybe not knowing, like we have that whole section of, even though they did kind of know, but this idea of not knowing the person that you are friends with, it just, you don't actually know what they look like. You don't actually know if they're, who they are purporting to be, or who their avatar, says they are. If it doesn't matter, they can be whoever they want online. And then is that a different version of the same person that you're friends with? And really interesting. I thought some of the stuff that it brought up. So I'm glad that it sparked something for that in you too. Speaking of liking the Bad Boys, we got Sue with her hand up. She said in the chat that she's a sucker for the Bad Boys. So Sue, I don't know if you want to defend those comments or what you want to tell us. Talk to us.
I've got a history. I didn't think Dove was all that bad, but there you go.
You've had worse.
I'm not a huge gamer, but I do remember Oregon Trail on a floppy disk in one of the first Macintosh hard desktops. And I kept dying of dysentery, so I didn't play it, but my nieces and nephews loved it and would play for hours. So Kara, you brought up a point that I, as a person with a disability, did even dawn on me. So I think she did it well. I think she did write Sam's character pretty well. But it is a trope. It's that trope, and I should have spotted it. And I was just liking the book so much that it went right over my head. So she was skillful. I'll give her that. But it does go into that trope that is out there. So I don't know. I don't know what to say. I think she's a good writer if she made me forget about it. So
yeah. Thanks for your perspective on that, Sue. And Maura is back with her hand. Maura, talk to us.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts, because like asexual and aromantic characters, or not even characters, but identities are often pathologized, like, oh, you just haven't met the right person yet, or it's trauma related. And I feel like I'm trying to think of the right words. I feel like Sam kind of, or like that she was able to like address that without making it super like stereotypical of like, well, he doesn't feel comfortable in his body and that's why he's not dating. It was like, no, Sam just like didn't really connect with people on that way. And I never got the impression that Sadie wasn't attracted to him because of like, I think that Sadie wasn't attracted to him because she didn't understand the way that he loved. I think as evidenced by like him making an entire game for her, and like trying to bring her out of her depression, and she being like, "Ooh, that's creepy." To be fair, I would be a little bit like, "Oh, that's creepy myself." But I think that it was just like she didn't like they got each other on like kind of this, I don't know, like extraterrestrial level, but not on this planar level. And that's where Sadie was like, I couldn't connect. So I never got the impression that his race or his disability had anything to do with kind of his disembodiment and his disconnection from like romantic or sexual relations. And I even think like she portrayed him as being desirable. I mean, he had a girlfriend who was like liked him. So I think that she did it well. It is interesting considering I'm assuming she's not a amputee man, Asian man. That's not her identity, but I felt like it was kind of handled skillfully. And I wonder how her own like mixed race identity and kind of having pieces of her and all of these characters played into that.
Yes, more. I can confirm that she. I tried to upload a picture of her. If you haven't seen her, I mean, she's a looks like a white woman in her mid 40s, and does not appear to. I did not get enough research on this yet, but I think she has been asked about that, about writing about disability. Does anyone know?
She's Jewish and Korean. She's mixed race.
Okay.
That's about as much as I got off the blurb. But it's because I wanted to look up. I thought that was, well, also I track how many like authors of color I read, so I do a lot of research when I'm adding it into my spreadsheet. But
Your spreadsheet.
yeah.
All right. Your spreadsheet goes up against Donna's notes. Oh boy, this is gonna be good. There's a lot of fun stuff going on in the chat right now. If you guys aren't reading that, I don't know how to do. It's not working for me to make emoticons or comment on things. There's like a whole new world of chat opening up here that I'm so excited to go back and read, and I can't be in both places at once. So I'm kind of bopping around here. But I see Andrew's got his hand up, and there's some really exciting stuff. If anyone lives in the Maplewood area, there's some events that are being posted in the chat. So you might want to check those out. Andrew, talk to us.
One of the things that that hasn't been mentioned is how nuanced the resentments that the characters pick up on one another are in their lack of information about one another. So one thing I thought that the author handled really well was pain. So Sam is in pain, physical pain all the time, and he is hiding that fact from everybody as much as he can. And so he, the narrator tells us why he's not coming into work or why he's depressed, but he never, ever reveals that to anyone else, that it's his physical pain that is causing a lot of his activities, a lot of his actions in the middle of the book. And I think that's a great lesson. I mean, we don't get to know why people behave the way that they do in real life unless they tell us those things. And in many of the cases where there's a misunderstanding between Sadie and Sam, it's because they don't know what's going on in one another's life, and they can't communicate about it. The only person that helps them communicate is Marx. he's the one that's able to get them to, some level of ability to work with one another. And then, Sam, there's stuff in the chat about Sam and his whether or not he's attractive or not attractive. He at the beginning, he doesn't think he's good enough for Sadie because he's this charity case, and she's rich and he's not, and that causes a problem. And then later, he becomes a celebrity. He becomes adored and at Comic-Con, and he gets this whole image about himself, and that becomes a problem between him and Sadie, because Sadie is like, who is this guy? I just thought those interactions between those two characters were so realistic in that it mimicked the way we as people hearing from the narrator could see those things, but they really kept them separate. There wasn't any of these moments where there was the aha moment where, oh, I now I understand why you behaved like that. Now I get it. Why, you really do love me, or, that kind of stuff. It just never happened. And that is very much, I think, like real life in our relationships. The resentments that we build up against other people, or jealousies, or any of those types of things, they don't get resolved unless you have some of those moments. And it's so rare for people to really have those. So I thought, but not in books. In books, you've got to have that satisfaction. And we didn't get it in this one. I thought it was just fabulous that way.
As they might be giants once saying, no one ever gets what they want, and that is beautiful. CB, do you get what you want?
I swear I liked this book, but I'm only bringing like critiques or like criticisms, but I gave it
You know what? But it
5
wouldn't be Books and Bars if you, I mean, like, I swear you don't like almost any of the books we read, but we still like being part of the discussion, and we still like having you, even though it's amazing to me that you don't like 90% of the books we end up reading, but you're still here. So hey.
I'm a fast reader, so I can like get through your picks, Jeff.
You're in all these other book clubs that I've been talking about, right? That's why. Yeah. This is just one of your 20 book clubs.
And I appreciate like reading stuff that I wouldn't normally read. Like I said, this is a book where I really loved it, and I probably wasn't going to pick it up without people kind of forcing me to, because I was like, I don't really want to read about video games, or like, I don't know. Anyway, great book. The other thing though that I thought, like one of the big conflicts between Sadie and Sam was, about gender and credit, and a thing where she's in a very like male dominated industry. It's still super toxic today. And like her thing about wanting to make sure she got credit to me was very reasonable. And in the end, the book kind of dismissed it. They have she has a conversation with her students where she's like, yeah, I guess Sam was right. Like no one ever remembers like who did stuff or what. And I just don't know if that rang true. Now, I don't know like a ton of like famous video game people, but like I've heard of a couple, and they're all men. I don't know any like famous video game woman. And in this book, like Sadie would be like the famous video game woman to remember in this fiction. But like, because of how things were handled with Sam, like she's maybe not getting the credit. And to me, like that would be a big deal. Like it would make sense for her to care about that. And so I thought at the end, when she kind of had that conversation with a student, and it ended up kind of being like dismissive, like, yeah, I shouldn't have cared about who got credit because no one remembers it anyway. And I'm like, I think people remember who got credit. Like, I don't even know that many video games. And even I've heard of like Hideo Kojima, like he's an auteur, like I know who he is. And I don't know like any woman who does the same thing. So credit matters in this instance. And I thought that was like good that it was a conflict. And I thought it was weird that it got dismissed at the end.
So can anyone think of like what are some famous women in the video game industry? Like, can you think of any games, really famous games designed by women? Please chime in. I'm trying to search for it right now, because you bring it up and I'm like, ugh. I mean, there has to be. But yes,
the only video game person I can think of is Anita
names.
Sarkeesian, and she didn't make games. She just got death threats from gamer boys. And I don't know any like woman creator. But that said, I can't name many men creators, so I'm not the person to ask for this.
Yeah, I don't know a ton of video game creator names off the top of my head either. That, I mean, yeah, it would be hard. You know, I think in terms more of, yeah, I don't. But yeah, but certainly any ones I probably think of, the few I could are going to be men.
I think it's the wrong club.
The wrong club.
I think we're in
No.
the wrong club to be getting video game creators.
The wrong. We're in the wrong book club to come up with these.
That's right.
What is the right book club, Andrew, for that? Is
No.
it one at
I said
Maplewood?
you have to go to another club entirely. Like maybe one where they play Magic or Dungeons and
Oh, okay,
Dragons.
it's not a book club.
Then I don't know that you've got enough people that are that into video games.
I mean, I don't even like video games, and I can think of like Miyamoto. I've heard of his name. He's like a famous Japanese one. Kojima is like a famous Japanese creator. And then like Sid Meier, I think, is like a video game creator that I've heard of. I don't know.
I don't know who any of those people are.
No, Sid Meier was the wasn't he the creator of the
Civilization.
Civilization.
Oh yeah, yep. And his name.
And he was
on
a
the
famous
package.
professor.
Yep.
And then I put a link into
So did I.
famous.
Did you do the same one I did?
Oh, maybe, I don't know.
Oh my
Like,
gosh, we did
like-
the same one. We both Googled the same ways.
Yeah, Centipede. And then, but I went down. I didn't pick the first. It was like the fifth or
Oh.
seventh one.
Oh.
But then
Alright.
they're ones I recognize. But anyway, but the women in programming, like COBOL was invented by a woman. I mean, I'm in the industry, and it's basically an industry. Like the first programmer, Ada Lovelace, was a woman. The whole thing, like, because math was looked down upon, so women were sent to do it as calculators. But they were all the smart ones, and then it got all hot and moneyed industry, and then men came in and bullied their way in the 50s. You could probably write a great feminist thesis on that subject, but they and then I'll just shut up here and let the woman talk. Jessica.
Yeah, I see Jessica's got her hand up, but you bring up another book club in Maplewood, Hot and Moneyed. They only read. So the bit is, I hear something and then I come up with, that's the name of a book club. Now, what kind of books are those? You decide. Hot and Moneyed. Is that a club you? If it was in Maplewood, maybe you would join. I don't know. I don't know why Maplewood. It just came to mind. But I like the idea that these are all happening there, and we're not invited or not part of it. But maybe you are. Maybe Rachel Geiser is. I don't know. But Jessica has her hand up. So Jessica, before you launch into what you're going to say, Jessica, you're on the hook. Hot and Moneyed. What kind of books do they read?
I'm gonna be horrifically stereotypical and imagine that it's some tightly drawn faces in Minnetonka, and they read only Susie Orman. That's what's
Oh, there you
happening.
go. Yes, and they all have blazers, right?
And they
wear
all have blazers. Yeah. I'm just gonna I'll bring it down to the basest of level.
And the purpose of their club is everyone's invited, but it's really just like because they want to be the financial advisor or the broker for that person. And so they're like, they lure you into the book club, and while you're there, they want to talk about your 401k. And then they're like, hold on a second, I'm all getting all hot and moneyed about this right now. I got to take my blazer off. No respect. All right, Jessica, talk to us.
This has just been fabulous. I think this book, I've only been part of this book club for about a year, but I think this book and listening to all of you talk about it, it feels like every single time someone talks about it, it feels personal. Like it feels like it hits home. At least it did for me. It just, and I'm not a gamer. I didn't go to Harvard. There's nothing in there. I've never created something at that level or even remotely, but I felt like the characters were built so beautifully and allowed for so much personality and allowed for so much of your own diving into things and looking at your own life that I found it it just kind of brings tears to my eyes. Not, it was well written, but there's something just very personal about it. And I think something that I kept going back to, and it's something that, you know, you read and or you listen to in podcasts about like amazing people who've done amazing things, and you know, as you get older, like when you're a kid, you're like, Thomas Edison was the best, like, wow, and then you learn he was a jerk, and then you just, like, as you get older, you kind of keep learning that these amazing minds were kind of terrible people, and it is this amazing thing of like these two characters of Sadie and Sam are really flawed. Like, there are multiple times where I was like, Sadie, just like get it together. Like, stop being such a jerk to him, and him, I'm like, quit it. And then there's Marks, who's like this beautiful character who's very kind and loving, and just this like this person who props up the other two. And it made me just keep thinking about, someone mentioned the Jeff Bezos of the world, or Elon Musk's of the world. It's like, do you have to be a complete jerk to create something beautiful that others see? Is that necessary? And not that it is, but it just made me keep thinking about that. And so this book brought me both kind of this hope and sadness. And yeah, it was a topic that kept coming up for me.
Well, thanks, Jessica. I really liked what you said, and it frames kind of the whole discussion for me when I go back and think about how everyone has talked about it in a way that does feel sort of personal, and I think that's great. And I love that it's not necessarily that we're all gamers or that it was just the video game aspect of it, but I think there is something to Gabrielle Zevin's writing and these characters that did strike something for a lot of us. I mean, I actually haven't heard too many dissenting opinions on it. Usually we have a much more mixed one. And usually if we all like something, it's not that good of a discussion, but I really thought that there were so many great points. Like I said, I'm super excited to be able to read all the stuff that I missed in the chat too. And I get to do this again tomorrow. And so do you. You're all invited if you want to. I felt bad for the fact that we were supposed to meet in person and we might have, you know, way too much snow. But like I said, hey, if there's only a few of us, that's fine. But I will do another one tomorrow at 6:30. And if you know someone that couldn't make it tonight and that was planning on it, let them know. I try to put all this stuff out on our Facebook. I alert people on Instagram. We have a newsletter. We have a website. I don't like to, of course, put the links up to Zoom out in public because that's when we get the Zoom bombers. But I will, I put them in newsletter and I'll put them in our Facebook group and stuff like that. And I always tell people you can just, message me and I'll share it again. So I have a link for our next Zoom in the chat right now for our next book, which is I Must Betray You. I am a book ahead. So my wife and I read this one, really enjoyed it. It's a YA novel, but it's not like, it's just dealing with like high school stuff or whatever. It's actually dealing with the Cold War in 1989 and communism and Romania. And it's historical fiction and that the author has really done a lot of research on. So I thought it was really compelling, especially being around the age of the characters at the time of this book and not knowing so much about what was going on in a place like Romania versus just assuming everything was Russia. But what about other countries around there and what was happening? So that is next month's book. Highly recommend checking that one out. And then we have The Candy House, which I just started and I'm already totally into. And I feel like there are going to be some connections to, if you really like this book, I'm already feeling like I don't know. I only started it recently, but it does have some characters from Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, a previous novel of hers, which got a lot of acclaim. It's not a direct sequel. You certainly don't have to have read Goon Squad to read it. It's almost in the way that like Taylor Jenkins Reid has, recurring characters and stuff like that, as far as I know so far. But anyway, The Candy House by Jennifer Egan, that's April's book. And then May's book is probably the second book other than Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow that everyone says is their favorite book of the last year or so, and that is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. And I'm super excited to start that one. So that's April's book. And then if I have some news, yes, why not? I'll just share it right now. It's very exciting, although I haven't shared it wide yet. But we have a return. We have a Minneapolis venue starting in the summer. So we will do St. Paul and Minneapolis. We'll be in Northeast Minneapolis starting in June, third Wednesdays starting in June, third Wednesday of each month. And we'll have access to a patio. And sometimes we'll be inside, sometimes we'll be outside on the patio, depending on the weather and what else is going on. But we have a private room at Sociable Cider Works, and they have a permanent food truck there, so there'll always be food to get. They serve cider. They also serve beer on tap that they make, and they have some seltzers and stuff like that, and then sodas that they make. So they don't have hard cocktails or wine, but if you've been used to going to Urban Growler, this will give you, there'll be more cider, but they still have beer. So that will be a Minneapolis, Northeast Minneapolis option. Very exciting to back to doing live events in person in Minneapolis for Books and Bars. Third Wednesday of June, and then moving forward, third Wednesdays through the rest of the year. And I plan on hopefully sustaining and still being able to do St. Paul and Minneapolis. We'll see how it goes this summer. If there's enough people that want to do it in both, I would love to do a summer at Urban Growler too. So pick and choose like the old days. You can, whichever one's more convenient to you. I don't have one in Maplewood yet, but there's so many other great book clubs there going on that I'm sure you could join one. And if you don't like those, Hot and Moneyed is available in Minnetonka, according to Jessica. That's her new favorite. Anyone else have anything else they want to say about Gabrielle Zevin's Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow? Thank you to Rebecca for the sketch note. Again, I will probably. This one was pretty long, so I don't know. We'll see how tomorrow goes. If there'll be two separate videos, or if I combine them into one, might be a little long, but who knows? But join us tomorrow if you want to, starting at 6:30 for that one. And it should be a good time. Thanks again to everybody that took the time, and protect yourselves. Don't get caught in the snow. Get some groceries before it's too late. Shovel out, and yeah. Happy February. Good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.